I don't know what else to say. Penn State men's basketball blew it against Minnesota, a very winnable game. You were up by 16 to start the second half, and you end up with an 83-74 loss. When you could have set yourself up with positive momentum going into this stretch of the season, you've now gone backwards.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Penn State fans? That is right. You are Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, bringing you all things Penn State sports coverage, joined once again by special guest Adam Sheetz. He is the Penn State men's basketball insider for Penn State's Com Radio. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers join today, and you will get $200 in bonus bets. That is right, $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more is a winner. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And become an everydayer if you are not already subscribed to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for all of the latest analysis around your favorite sports for Penn State. Football, recruiting, men's basketball in this case, men's hockey, and wrestling, all right here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Adam, Penn State men's basketball, disappointed. They were disappointing because that was a very winnable game. That was the THON game on top of it. I don't mean to pull that card here, but you lose at home, prime time, Saturday night. Crowd was very good from what compared to what it normally is. And in the final segment, I want fans to stick around for this because I have an interesting topic to discuss with you, Adam, about are the fans possibly responsible for Penn State? Just a point of conversation that I was made aware of. We'll talk about it more, but ultimately Penn State disappointed. You were up by largest lead was 16 points against Minnesota. You led by 14 at half. And that's funny, ironic, right? Because Penn State's been the second half team the entire season. And now they come out, play the best first half of the entire season for them under Mike Rhoades, and they blow the lead. Too many easy baskets. Kanye Clary getting elbowed, uppercut in the game, and the ref's not calling something. Ticky-tacky calls against Penn State. Some aggressive calls that weren't made against Minnesota when they should have been. I'm not here to blame the refs because you did have a 16-point lead in the second half, and this was a winnable game. They should have won, but they didn't. So what exactly went wrong here? Because if you look at the box score, Adam, solely just the box score, Penn State wins this game on paper, but this game's not played on paper. It's played on the court.
Yeah, I think it's a really frustrating game, if you're a Penn State fan sitting there watching it because of how well they played early. I think Mike Rhoades hit the nail on the head when he talked after the game. They're not a consistent basketball team yet, and that's been plaguing them all year. They haven't played a game where they played 40 minutes of really, really good basketball. Even you look at the upset win against Wisconsin, they had a really good stretch early, got off to a great start, and just kind of holding on for dear life throughout the remainder of that game, were able to hold on to get the win. But this game, a team that's actually played really, really well in late game situations, when they've been in close games, they've found ways to win them or give themselves chances to win. They struggled to do that in this game against Minnesota. Again, you mentioned Kanye Clary got hurt late in the game. Nick Kern Jr. as well was injured and was unable to come back in the game late as well. I mean, that's two of your five starters and two of your most important players unable to be out there. And they just really struggled in some late game situations. I never like to, question coaching decisions or anything when we talk about stuff like this, but there was one situation. It was Minnesota's up by one. DeMarco Dunn misses a free throw. So Minnesota up one. They called timeout. I actually thought it was going to help Penn State out because Leo O'Boyle was in the game. And I'm like, maybe you could sub Leo out, get a better athlete out there to guard Dawson Garcia, who's Minnesota's go-to best player. They elect to leave O'Boyle out on the floor, and he gets beat on a drive for an and one. Then O'Boyle also kind of, maybe frustrated about the initial play, then gives up an offensive rebound on the missed free throw and gives up another and one that stretched the lead to 5 and really put Penn State out of it. But I think that's just a couple of things late in the game where, there definitely, injuries happen to this team. Nick Kern Jr. is out there in that situation. If things go differently, he was unable to be out there. But a frustrating loss for Penn State in a game, as you mentioned, this was as winnable of a game as they might have on on their schedule for the rest of the season. You look at home against Minnesota, who's a team that they're very comparable to and how they play in styles. And just when you have a 16-point lead, you got to find a way to hold on, especially with, as you mentioned, the crowd. There were 12,000 people at the Bryce Jordan Center. That's a lot for a Penn State basketball team, especially a team that's under 500 going into the game. They had a good crowd. The students showed up, and, there was a little worry with the hockey game happening at the same time. It was their wear white game. They were able to still get the crowd at the Bryce Jordan Center and just unable to pull it out. So I'm sure definitely a frustrating loss for the players and the coaching staff in the game. They had basically won, just unable to hold on to it.
And you mentioned the attendance. Funny enough, Penn State men's hockey set an attendance record of its own, and basketball still had 12,000 fans, just to put it in perspective. So the fan support is there, which is why I'm eager to kind of debate that in the final segment. But just still going back to what Penn State basketball is failing to do here, because so Minnesota is not a bottom feeder anymore.
No.
Whatever they're doing, that they've been able, I know there's the transfer portal, so you can remake your team overnight. There isn't this, there's a 5-year rebuild anymore. If you can't win in the first couple of years, or at least show progress, that's something on you. So Minnesota to almost reinvent itself overnight, or at least over the offseason, is nothing short of impressive here. But this was still a beatable team. Overall record a little bit different, but in conference, Minnesota is the exact same as Penn State until they played this head-to-head game. When I watch this Penn State team, I'm tired of the easy baskets. I really am. I think that shifts momentum so much, because Penn State and Kern, very good defensively. I will continue to hype him up on the show. He can guard just about anybody. Now, Dawson's a bit of a stretch, being 6'11", Zach Edey as well. But basically, he can guard your 1, your 2, your 3, up to your 4 position. The center is a little bit difficult. And then his scoring game has come on. So when Kanye Clary and Nick Kern Jr. come out of the game at various points in time and can't play as consistently in this one, that certainly doesn't help. And then it just kind of messes with the flow of the offense, because this is an offensive team for Penn State this season. They are not a defensive team. But too many times when Penn State is in close games, it's how they ended up losing the Northwestern game. They weren't able to push Maryland all the way to the end, even though they kept it close. But that's the thing. They just give up too many easy baskets down the stretch. I felt like Minnesota wasn't challenged in those final 5 minutes. Whatever basket they wanted, they got.
Yeah, I think you made a good point there. They're a defensive team in a way that they use their defense to create offense, which means they're trying to go out and they're trying to get turnovers. They're scrambling around, trying to get steals. Ace Baldwin Jr. is one of the best in the country and in the Big Ten at doing that. But when you're trying to maybe run a guy off to double and you're trying to get steals, you're going to leave guys open. And good teams, good offensive teams like Minnesota proved to adjust to that. They struggled really early. That's how Penn State got up to their lead. Minnesota struggled handling that pressure, dealing with the double team. Ben Johnson, credit to him. He's done a good job in 3 years at Minnesota, a team that was bottom feeder, now being able to compete in the Big Ten. He went into the halftime and he adjusted to the way Penn State was playing. And in the second half, you saw Penn State scored first, then immediately Minnesota started to take it apart, that Penn State defense, and getting those open looks, as you mentioned. So their defense is trying to force turnovers, but when they don't, you're going to be able to get a lot of open looks. And like, even you talk about the big comeback against Ohio State, which was one of the highlights of this team's season. They were giving up a lot of open looks, and Ohio State missed a lot of really good shots and a chance to maybe put that game away. And that's how Penn State was able to come back and win. So the way they play is going to be in a lot of runs in a game where they were on a 19-2 run in this game against Minnesota. They're going to get on runs, but they're going to give up runs if they're not forcing turnovers and their offense gets stagnant. So they're just trying to figure out, and I think that goes back to what Mike Rhoades said. They're not a consistent team. It's just the way they play. It is very hard to be consistent, especially in a league like the Big Ten with so many very good, very competitive teams.
Now this is the turning point. And Adam, in this next segment, we're going to discuss, is there any hope left for this Penn State team? And I'm strictly talking about Big Ten tournament run, maybe a Cinderella entrance into the NCAA tournament. I am not trying to say, but what can they do? Obviously outside of winning, but with the tough stretch of the schedule coming up, what are the comparisons between this group and last year's team with Micah Shrewsbury? Remember, that team had a bad January. Were able to circle the wagons in late February, early March, and ultimately make the NCAA tournament. Is that in the cards for Mike Rhoades' squad in year one? We're going to discuss on the other side of this break. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. And FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W, or two, or three, and even more. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. If you got a favorite player prop, they're already posted on FanDuel. You can see Patrick Mahomes' passing yards, Isaiah Pacheco rushing yards, Christian McCaffrey receiving yards, and so many other options. But now, new customers, when you join today, you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more is a winner. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get started to sign up. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. The Locked On Podcast Network is making history. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. If you want to connect with us in other ways, check out X, formerly known as Twitter. You can follow my personal account. You can follow the show account. You can also keep up with Adam with what he's doing for Penn State men's basketball coverage, as well as Adam, you're going out to the Super Bowl as well. So that'll be very exciting.
Yeah.
Well, safe travels. Yeah, exactly. For Penn State men's basketball here, they are going into a very tough stretch. And I want to remind everyone for the 2022-23 team that, yes, led by Micah Shrewsbury. I know people don't like saying his name all that much right now, but that was a team that, if we can compare and contrast here, we're in similar situations now. It seems like this Mike Rhoades team is set up to go on a bit of a losing streak now. And that's why Minnesota was so much more important, because you can, as we've seen, this is a momentum-based team, not only within the games, but within the schedule as well. So I'm worried that now, because you lost this Minnesota game, this is going to kind of spiral a little bit. You go on the road against Rutgers. You go on the road against Indiana. Two games that, if you create some positive momentum, you can probably push and break through and steal some wins that you aren't expected to get. And Vegas will certainly have Penn State as an underdog when those spreads and totals are released. But then you go further down the schedule here for Penn State, and you have Iowa, then you're at Northwestern, Michigan State, just to name the next few. So, Adam, the question, the debate is now, how many games can Penn State afford to lose in this case? Because that's what I'm preparing for. Maybe they steal a game against Rutgers, and that's the hope, because Rutgers is down this season, and oh boy, I'm not losing any sleep over that. But Indiana's a more talented team, a more athletic team, and we've seen that Penn State against teams that are just purely more athletic they are not a good matchup for them. Michigan State, Purdue, just to name a couple of them. Indiana is another one of those cases. But where Penn State can match that intensity and out-scheme them, yes, they win those games, but there aren't really any of those in the near future here. So last year, they lost a good chunk of games late January going into early February, and then were able to circle the wagons. So the question is, how many games can this Penn State team afford to lose before trying to circle the wagons and maybe pushing for an NCAA tournament bid if all goes well? What is the perfect formula?
I mean, I think, this is a stretch, but I think they can really only lose 2 games in these next upcoming games. It's just, it's too tough in the Big Ten, especially this team that relies so much. And they put themselves behind the 8 ball because of losses in the non-conference. With the loss to Bucknell, they're 9-11. I mean, they're under 500 right now overall. Their Big Ten record's not terrible, but their overall record's just really down to where, it's really hard to make a push if you're talking about the NCAA tournament or even the NIT tournament at this point for Penn State. So I think if you're looking at it from a point of looking towards the postseason, you really can only lose 2, and that's a tough stretch to ask a team that is not a super talented team this year. They don't have the overwhelming talent. I think you look at last year's team with guys like Seth Lundy, Jalen Pickett, who might have been one of the best guards in the country, was an All-American. You look at Andrew Funk, who's a knockdown shooter. Cam Winter could score. They just have better players last year than they do this year, and a more veteran team as well. A bunch of seniors that had known what they were doing, and Micah Shrewsbury put it on them. It's your season. What are you going to do with it? It's the last time you're going to play college basketball, and they answered that bell and were able to make that run to make the NCAA tournament. I don't know if this team has that because they're a good mix of youth, so they're going to have some young mistakes with some of the guys coming off the bench. They do have the veterans, but you're relying a lot on a guy like Kanye Clary, who's his first real year of full-time basketball, played some reserve basketball last year, but not a lot of minutes. Now he's really the full vocal point of an offense. He's number one on everyone's scouting report when he's going into every game. So it's a big ask for this team. If we're looking at the postseason, you could really only lose 2 of these next 5. You're going to have to get some big wins. Look at Michigan State at home, maybe Indiana or Rutgers on the road. A Northwestern win on the road would go huge for your resume. So I think that those are what you're looking at if you're looking for postseason. But I think right now the big thing is just looking and getting better. I think, maybe putting together a game where you play 40 minutes. Even if you don't win the game, if maybe you lose a close one on the road to Indiana or Northwestern, but you put together 40 minutes, it's a back and forth game. You can use that as momentum. They were unable to really use that momentum they got from the Wisconsin win to propel that. They ended up getting off to a slow start at Ohio State, then had the week off, which I thought was a bad time to have your full week off in the Big Ten play and come back against Minnesota and unable to keep that win that game either. So I think there's a lot of pressure on this Penn State team right now. They got to find a way to answer, and it starts on Wednesday against Rutgers.
And that's what I mean. They've shown that they can be competitive. So you say that they're not as talented of a team that you would like them to see. They have so many different parts that allow them to be a little good at a little bit of everything. And I think that, funny enough, that's something that I said at the beginning of the season would help them out. But honestly, it's what has held them back, because I feel like there's still concerns about identity. And I know what the identity is, but it's not like you said, taking defense and creating offense. That's why they force so many turnovers. It seems like every single game they lead the category of points scored off of turnovers, and that's good, but they're just giving up too many easy baskets to go along with it. But they have Kudus Wahab and Demetrius Lilly, who's come on, that can clean up the glass. We haven't seen too much of Faber Ire. I think the part that has held this Penn State team back is the 3-point shooting, and just natural overall shooting could be so much better. And it's surprising to me because Puff Johnson's a good shooter. Ace Baldwin is a good shooter. Kanye Clary has become better with his just open shooting and everything else. Zach Hicks. And these guys just aren't living up to that standard. Leo O'Boyle has gone so cold ever since that Ohio State game, and he was brought in simply for his sharp shooting. So if Penn State is going to go on any sort of run, whether it's to create optimism around the program, whether it is to build momentum going into the Big Ten tournament, maybe shocking a few teams here and there, they probably still believe that they have NCAA tournament aspirations, and that's fine. I won't shake that belief here, but it's hard to sit back and say, because of how tough this Big Ten schedule is remaining for them and where they are right now in terms of the momentum, it's negative going on the road like this back-to-back after a game you should have won against Minnesota. It's just not looking too good right now. I think it's still chemistry. Talent aside, you have, like I said, so many different parts where you're good at a little bit of everything. You're good. You're decent enough at shooting. You're decent enough at passing and creating offense. You're good enough at ISO, but you're not overly dominant at one thing. And it shows with Penn State, because they don't, other than turnovers forced, they don't dominate. They don't have another category where they're dominant in that can complement this one skill that they've gone all in on.
Yeah, I think that's been the big thing for them, is they're not great at a lot of things, and some of these teams have their full identity. Penn State hasn't really found a true identity that can work consistently. You mentioned the points off turnovers, but as the other team, you're like, oh, let's just try to protect the basketball as much as we can, limit the turnovers. They're going to force some, but if we get it's 10 turnovers instead of 18 turnovers, that's going to affect Penn State a lot in the way they're going to play and how effective they're going to be. So it's really fixable for the other team to deal with, as opposed to a team like Purdue, who's got Zach Edey. Our identities get him the ball. and not many people are going to be able to stop that when you go down low to them. So I think that's going to be the big thing. The one thing they do have going for them is the Big Ten is not as strong this year as it was last year. Right now, they're looking at maybe a 6-bid league right now for the Big Ten, which is crazy to say because the Big Ten's been a team that's getting 10 or 11 teams in the last couple of years, now all the way down to 6, most likely this season, not as strong. So these teams that you're looking at, it's going to be tough on paper, are teams that have struggled and lost games that they're supposed to win, which puts Penn State in a position where you can go on the road and you can feel confident going to Assembly Hall, which is a very tough place to play at Indiana and maybe win. You can go to Jersey Mike's Arena and play against Rutgers and have a good chance to win a game. Purdue struggled there on Sunday and were able to pull out the win against Rutgers, but Rutgers is a team that struggled. They're a team really looking towards next year. We talked a little bit about Penn State, maybe trying to build that momentum towards next season. Rutgers got the number 2 and number 3 recruit in the country going there next year. They are definitely looking towards next season, just trying to maybe get what they can out of the team they have right now for Steve Pikiell. But it's definitely winnable games this week. And I think, as always, you're looking ahead. You got to win the first one before you can win the next one. And Penn State's going to have to use their identity because Rutgers completely different. They want to play slow and they want to create defense to offense, but they want to slow the game down if they can. Use Cliff Omori, their big guy, to attack you. They're unable to do that a lot against Purdue, but when they can use him, his versatility, he can knock down a 15-foot shot, then attack you on the inside. He's very versatile, big, one of the better in the Big Ten. I think there's going to be their identity, and Penn State's going to have to adjust to that as well and try to find a way to win a game. It's going to be tough, but it's definitely winnable playing against a Rutgers team that is not overwhelmingly talented and Penn State can match up with very well.
Are the fans responsible? Where I sat at the Penn State Minnesota game, there was a fan that was trying to rally the crowd, but I think he was going about it the wrong way. He was criticizing Penn State fans, and his point, I don't exactly agree with it, but I think it's important to debate. That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is also brought to you by Jase Medical. I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of life, but can we just talk for a moment about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. This is scary. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling, or if a loved one or someone I cared about got sick while a supply chain issue kept them from life-saving medications that they needed. Thankfully, we're all going to be okay because of Jase Medical. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics that treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, skin infections, among others. This stuff can happen to any of us, unfortunately. But you can visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jasemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. That is jasemedical.com with offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. And remember, if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast for the latest analysis around your favorite Penn State teams: football, wrestling, men's basketball, men's hockey, and recruiting. We talk about it all here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And in this final segment, sitting where I sat at the Minnesota game, there was a fan and a group of fans. Or I should say fans. I don't know. I think they were there for the Penn State game. They talked about being at a Kansas game and everything else. So to provide a little backstory here and to go straight to the point in the same breath as well, he said that it is the Penn State fan base's fault that this team, this program, isn't at an elite level, combined with, of course, the on-court product as well. But he's saying it starts and ends with the fans, saying things like, oh, the curtains are up. If this was an elite basketball program, there would be no curtains. Those damn curtains, Adam. And the fans, and in my section anyway, everybody was seated in their seats. There was nobody standing. Some people were standing. Some people were getting loud and rowdy. I thought the crowd noise level was good. I thought it was intense at points, but there was definitely, I didn't really stand up and cheer all that much. I'll be honest. Maybe I'm a fair weather fan. Who knows? But besides that point, but he was going all in, criticizing his people, just trying to get everybody riled up. And I know what he was trying to do. He was just trying to be a nuisance in this case. However, does he make a point that because the Penn State crowd isn't really into it, then there's not that energy that feeds off of it? And I tie this back to Penn State football before the whiteout games. And Penn State football was a quiet crowd. Some people know this, but probably the modern Penn State fans that probably have been fans for maybe the past decade or so don't know that Penn State football games were basically silent library, honestly. And that people really didn't do, like gentle golf claps and everything. And then it became this rowdy, raucous crowd that became one of the best atmospheres in all of college football. So I think about that because Penn State men's basketball, at least right now, is definitely in that case. And Mike Rhoades is trying to push to that. So is this fan, is he right to say that it's the fan base's fault that Penn State's not an elite program? No, he's not correct, but he's also not wrong saying that more energy would help feed this team and be better because there's other factors that need to be considered. NIL, facilities, it starts and ends with recruiting. Micah Shrewsbury could only do so much. Going back to Pat Chambers, he can only do so much to recruit because I feel like Pennsylvania has a lot of good talent. And the 4 stars and the 5 stars and the high end 4 stars, and they never come to Happy Valley. So now it's Mike Rhoades and Pat Kraft's job to kind of push past that. So, and the fan, if you build it, I go back to this. If you build it, they will come. That's the saying I'm going to go off of here. If Penn State can build the program, you don't need the curtains anymore. The fans will show up at the Bryce Jordan Center in numbers. And even with the hockey game, 12,000 people showed up. So the fan, this fan, I think was a little bit, he reached out too much. His reach was a little too off.
Yeah, I think he's reaching a little bit. I think he makes a valid point with, the crowd. It hasn't always been great. It's very inconsistent. Now, I don't think that was the game to talk about because I thought the crowd was actually pretty good. One thing Mike Rhoades has said this year is the students have been showing up for him, and he's right there. They've had the student section behind the benches filled every game. They usually have them going up behind the baskets. They've been filled for the most part. So the students have been showing up this year for Penn State basketball, which has been very good. But I think you made a good point, Zach. Build it and they will come. The last time we had a full sellout in the Bryce Jordan Center was 2020 when they were a top 10 team. They were playing Minnesota. They were really, really good. They sold it out. Great atmosphere, and they beat Minnesota. And that was just such a great thing for Penn State. Pat Chambers was able to build a program. It took a long time, but he was able to get the team he wanted, and they were able to win a lot of games. So I think that's kind of the big thing. And I think Mike Rhoades knows that. And, I think it's very hard when you talk about fans because you have places like Villanova who play in a small arena that they pack it in, and it's very loud, kind of like Penn State's going to have when they play Illinois in Rec Hall. It's going to be a smaller arena packed in. I'm sure the crowd will be very rowdy like they had at the Palestra in January when they played Michigan as well. Those arenas help. That's why Rutgers is such a great home court advantage. Jersey Mike's Arena is a smaller arena. They're able to pack in a lot of people there, a very rowdy fan base, and you get a good crowd for every game. That's what makes Rutgers a tough place to play. And Penn State doesn't have that. They have a 15,000 seat arena and the Bryce Jordan Center. And it's very nice when you have a team that's good and everyone shows up, or you have 12,000 people there for a game and the crowd's into it. But I do think he made some points about it that Penn State, some of it's out of their control. They're going to play in the Bryce Jordan Center. They're not moving it back to Rec Hall as much as everyone's going to ask them to. They're going to keep it at the Bryce Jordan Center, and they're just going to have to continue to build and win games, and then people will show up. Micah Shrewsbury had the same problem last year. He was begging fans to show up for this team, and then they started to towards the end of the year, and they made their run. But I think you got to win games, and then if you're winning and you maybe get in that top 25 and everyone's talking about you, then the crowd will really be into it, and you'll get everyone there. But you're going to have to start winning games. Mike Rhoades, I think he's going to get there at some point, but it's got to be to stay the course, try to get the recruits in, try to make sure the facility's right. And you're playing a brand of basketball that fans are going to want to come to the Bryce Jordan Center and watch, and that'll fix that issue. But no, the fans are not the reason that Penn State basketball has struggled for so many years.
And I think Mike Rhoades has a really good initiative. The things that he is able to spin a Penn State basketball game, and I'm not saying he's doing propaganda or anything, but he's able to frame it in a way that doesn't just make it. I was excited to be at the game. Okay. Mike Rhoades has brought excitement, at least temporarily. We'll see again if there's success down the road and everything, which we would like to believe. But Mike Rhoades, at least at this point, with a team that isn't going to compete for a surefire NCAA tournament bid, isn't going to win a Big Ten tournament and be the top team at the end of the year in this conference, but it's still fun. They're under 500, but this has still been a fun season to me, in my opinion. So I think Mike Rhoades is doing a good job there, at least presenting it that Penn State basketball can create memories. And who's it most important for? The students and the student section, because you're not going to get a rowdy crowd unless the students are all into it. So I like that they're doing free tickets, they're doing giveaways, any initiative they can get to get the students in the building. And we also have to remember that the Bryce Jordan Center is not, it's a basketball arena, but it's more of, it's an entertainment arena, a concert, a place for concerts, a venue for concerts that also plays basketball games, like Sheetz. Adam Sheetz is a food place that sells gas. It's kind of like the same thing with the Bryce Jordan Center. It's a place that hosts concerts, but it also has the capability for a basketball game as well.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. I mean, the Bryce Jordan Center is their main revenue they normally get is coming from those concerts. It's coming from the stuff that's coming in for there. And it's great for that. I've been to a lot of concerts at the Bryce Jordan Center. They've been a lot of fun. And I think you look at that, they play basketball there. It's just a big arena. And, when if the team's not great and the place isn't filled, it's going to seem very, very quiet. That's just the way it is. But when everyone's engaged, I mean, it got really loud when they were coming back against Ohio State. They didn't have a great attendance number against Wisconsin. Weather had a lot to do with that. It was a 9:00 start, but when you were getting down to it, every fan's on their feet, and it was an exciting game to finish out when you're beating the number 11 team in the country and all the fans get to rush the court at the end of the game. So they've had a lot of fun doing things this year. They're a fun team to watch. I feel like they've always been, because for some reason Penn State's always the team in the Big Ten that's record's not going to be good, but every game they play is a close game, and nobody wants to play Penn State because no matter what happens, it's going to be inside of 10 points no matter who they're playing. But I think that's definitely the thing that Penn State's going to try to continue to do. And maybe eventually when Mike Rhoades a couple years down the road has the players, he's able to install the system he wants to do. They start winning these close games, then the team's record's really good. They're mostly a surefire pick for the NCAA tournament. Then everyone wants to come watch them in the Bryce Jordan Center. But it takes time. He inherited a program that, yes, was coming off an NCAA tournament appearance, but was losing everybody pretty much that contributed to that NCAA tournament if you look at the main lineup. So I think it was definitely going to take some time to rebuild it. And he's doing a good job in year one. He has talent. He has a lot of youth that's going to be back next season, which will be huge for him when you're trying to install that program. But it's going to take some time. And I think if he continues to do what he's doing, the fans will respond, and then we'll have a great crowd at the Bryce Jordan Center. And maybe if, the fan you were talking to is right, if they get that great crowd, maybe the team will become an elite basketball program. You never know.
Always great to chat some Penn State men's basketball and get that insight from the Penn State men's basketball insider himself, Adam Sheetz, over at Penn State's Com Radio. Remember, you can keep up with his takes, information all over at X, formerly known as Twitter. You can also keep up with the show on X, formerly known as Twitter as well, and wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Adam, thanks for the time again. As always, appreciate it.
Yep, thanks, Zach. Always a pleasure.